Imposter syndrome is real, but I often hear my clients stand behind imposter syndrome as a catch-all explanation for why things feel difficult. But when we dig deeper, it's often not imposter syndrome at all. It's that they aren't prepared or they aren't doing what it takes to create the results they want. Welcome to the Building Up Women in Property podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Bangura, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. Whether you're a woman aiming to become a confident, impactful leader, or you're a leader committed to promoting gender equity in the property and construction industry, this podcast is designed specifically for you. Join me every week to gain insights and inspiration that will leave you excited and confident about taking your next steps. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's dive into today's topic. Today, we are talking about what if it's not imposter syndrome? What if you are underprepared? And this topic comes on the back of a number of conversations that I've had with my clients recently. And I want to say at the outset, these are all incredible women who are doing, important work within the industry. But time and time again, I see these women and I see others confusing imposter syndrome for not doing what it takes, confusing imposter syndrome for simply being underprepared. And I want to share with you, firstly, how you know if it is genuine imposter syndrome or if it is being underprepared. And if you are underprepared, how do you move forward? How do you get out of your own way and start doing the preparation necessary so that you can be achieving the results that you want and having the impact that you want through your work? Because when we can stop hiding behind the self-doubt and take control of the situation, it will literally transform your confidence and your competence. I want to explore this with you today because I think once we can actually identify what is imposter syndrome versus what is not doing the work necessary and what is being underprepared, we can actually take the steps necessary to transform your competence and your confidence so that you can take control of your professional journey and start seeing the results you want. So let's start with what imposter syndrome is. Imposter syndrome is the phenomenon where people doubt their accomplishments and they have this persistent fear of being exposed as a fake or as a fraud, despite evident success. And when people are experiencing imposter syndrome, they often attribute their achievements to luck or other people or external factors, rather than owning their own abilities and efforts. And this in turn leads to feelings of inadequacy and often anxiety and a reluctance to pursue new opportunities and challenges because there's that constant fear of being found out as not being truly competent or deserving of the opportunity. Now, we've talked a lot about imposter syndrome on this podcast before, and I'll link to an episode in the show notes. But for the purposes of today, I absolutely want to acknowledge that imposter syndrome is a real thing. And whilst it affects men and women alike, it is more frequently seen in women and in people from minorities. And it is something we absolutely need to be aware of as women in the property and construction industry, because these feelings of being an imposter can absolutely come up, and they often will come up. But the distinction with imposter syndrome is that there is actually evidence that you are competent and that you do know how to do the job. So examples of this might be through your qualifications. They may be through projects or work that you have completed in the past. So you actually do have a reference point for your achievements and your accomplishments. But in your own mind, you are downplaying your abilities and your skills. It feels like it is not enough, but you actually do have some wins on the table. So when we actually do the work of identifying and uncovering imposter syndrome, we can see that there is a reality and then there is a different personal view. And that disparity, that is what makes the imposter syndrome. Now, this idea of being underprepared is something different. I want to share with you a real life example of how this showed up. So one of my clients was telling me about a project she was running. Now, for context, she's a project manager, she's very well accomplished and very knowledgeable, but this particular project is in a very niche area that she is not familiar with. She already had in her mind that she didn't know everything about this project in the way she might know some others. She presented this to me as being imposter syndrome, as feeling inadequate and unsure of her abilities to deliver, and that someone would find out that she was faking it, which on its surface seemed completely legitimate. But when we dug a little deeper, and, one of the things I do with my clients is I make them give me specifics. So what our brains tend to do is we generalize things, and that helps us process information. But it can be very unhelpful at times because something will happen once and we'll make a generalization about it. But when we can dig into specifics, we can actually gather useful data that will give us more insight. And so knowing this, I was asking for the specifics, like what happened that morning? How did the day start? And as we talked through it, a couple of things came up. So one was she'd started her day and hadn't had access to a printer. And so she went to Officeworks to print some documents out, and there was a whole heap of problems printing. And finally, she got the documents, but she was running late, which meant she hadn't had time to review the plans before getting to site. So when she got to site, she was on time, but she was still the last person there, and she was supposed to be leading the site inspection. And she was the only woman in the group, and turns out that she didn't have all her PPE with her. And so there was a bit of time sorting that out, and things just got off to a slow start. And this then started for her a narrative in her head about not being good enough, about not being accomplished enough or having the right skill set to run this type of project. When in fact what had happened was she was just underprepared. She hadn't had time to review the documents, so she wasn't across the detail that she should have been. And she didn't show up with the right equipment, so she delayed things. And rushing to site had made her feel stressed and out of control by not being able to greet the other people to site. But what it boiled down to was she was underprepared and disorganised on the day. And I understand that we are all busy and things happen, right? Printers break down, we forget things, we feel like we don't have time to review things. But the truth is, we control what we do. We control how we show up. We control if we are on time to things. We control whether we've read the minutes or read the plans. No one else can do that for us. It's only when we take ownership of our own preparation, or lack of preparation, as the case may be, that we can start to change things. I was talking about this on last week's podcast, where I was saying, I think the biggest barrier to success is you. It's our own mindset. It's our own priorities that limit what is possible for us. And that's not to say that there are not systemic challenges and barriers and other factors that make it harder. Those things are very much alive and real. But those things live outside of us, right? We cannot change the world as individuals. We cannot change all of those things on our own. But what we can do is show up for ourselves, and to show up in a way that demonstrates our mastery, demonstrates our standards of excellence. And that is entirely within our own control. And I think there are three main areas that really show up and demonstrate a lack of preparedness. And I want to talk about each of them because you'll probably encounter each of these in different ways. And of course, I want you to, as you're listening to this, think about, how does this apply to me? And if you can just take one thing from today's episode, that's a win, right? You don't need to try and fix everything all at once. I want you to think about one thing that really resonates with you right now in your stage of your career, and make the commitment to yourself to address that one area. And then from there, you can keep building on these, setting yourself up for success. Okay, so the first one is areas of friction. This is things like not having your PPE together, right? Or not having a working printer. They are just friction points. So they are small technical things that have gone wrong. And these, thankfully, are the easiest things to fix. But first of all, we need to identify them. So think about like areas of your work or your life that just end up being a bit chaotic, right? And, I think of my husband with this. And I would say he spends 20 minutes every day just looking for his glasses. Now, it drives me bonkers because to me, that is just a waste of time. And I wear glasses too. But the way I overcome that is I always put my glasses in the same place. And I've trained myself to do that. And so I never have to waste my time or energy trying to find something. And this is just basic organisation. We are halfway through the year, and it's the perfect time for a progress check. Are you on track with your goals? Or do you feel like you're slipping behind? The good news is there is still time to achieve your goals if you start now. To help you get there, I've created a mid-year check-in guide. This guide will help you clarify your progress, identify what's holding you back, and get you unstuck and laser focused. With it, you can move forward to create the results you want, so you can have that more fulfilling and rewarding career and life. Head on over to RebeccaBangura.com or find the link in the show notes to get your copy and start moving forward today. And whilst it sounds so simple, most of us are so busy in the day-to-day of things, we don't stop and actually consider what are these points of friction that exist in our lives and how can we either eliminate that or reduce the friction. And so I want you to just spend a couple of minutes thinking for yourself, what are the things that just don't work well? Am I always looking for my keys, or I can never find the right set of notes for projects? Think about what are these friction points for you. Then I want you to consider, how do we engineer these out, right? In the same way we would look at a risk or a hazard, we would look at what can we do to eliminate or reduce or mitigate this issue. We can do this for ourselves. And these little things like losing our keys, it may be as simple as training yourself to put them in the same spot every day. Or if you're working across multiple projects, it might be that you have different color books for each project, so that instead of having to scramble through your desk and all your papers, it is easy to find the collated notes for yourself. And I often say to my clients, the systems that we have in place so that the essential tasks always get done. There's a quote from Stephen R. Covey that I love, and it says, "Your systems are perfectly designed to get the results that you are getting." It's such a reminder that sometimes we are getting the results we want because we have systems that work. And if we aren't getting the results that we want, it's because our systems don't work. They don't support us. So I want you to, again, take a moment to identify those friction points and look at how you can eliminate, reduce, or mitigate against them. Now, the next big area is day-to-day preparations. So this is preparation that is necessary to do your job. And I think of this as being things like preparing for meetings. And, most of us work in environments where there are a lot of meetings. I remember when I was a project manager and development manager, most of the meetings I would go to were not very productive. Quite often that was because people showed up and they hadn't read the minutes, they weren't across their required actions, and it was just kind of picking up the conversation from where we left it off last meeting. There felt like there was a real lack of direction and ownership. Instead of being there to work on the critical things, quite often these meetings would be a bit of a powwow and circling back on things because certain people weren't prepared. And this is a waste of people's time. And to be frank, it's really demotivating and it detracts from doing meaningful and important work. And our days tend to get filled with busy work rather than impactful work. There's always Parkinson's law that says, work expands to fill up the time available for its completion. And it's true. I know for myself that I used to be in back-to-back meetings day in, day out, and I literally felt like I never had time to do work. My actual work would end up happening before hours or after hours because it was the only time I could squeeze it in. And then I remember my coach at the time saying to me, well, you control your diary. And it was like a revolutionary thing for me. And I appreciate that not everyone has the same level of autonomy, but a lot of you will. And I want you to think about, how can you take time to do the preparation, to do the work that you need to do in order to make all of those meetings and those interactions and those phone calls more meaningful and impactful. And so what I do now is I block out time before a meeting so that I can prepare. And I also block out time after a meeting so I can consolidate what I need to do and put in place time in my diary to complete the actions I need to do. Having that approach, taking that time, has been an absolute game changer for me. It means I never show up to a meeting unprepared. And people notice the difference, right? If you have a meeting with a client or you're doing a tender interview or something like that, you can always tell who has done the work beforehand. And that demonstrates not only competence, but mastery. That positions you as being a top performer, as being someone who does the work. That is so important for opportunities moving forward. I kind of have a rule of thumb for this. I think for everyday tasks, we want to have about 25% of the time to prepare. So for example, if you have an hour meeting coming up, then I suggest that you block out 15 minutes to prepare. If you have a half-day workshop, then maybe it's an hour to prepare. And of course, the amount of preparation time will vary depending on activity, but you want to start allowing for and creating time to prepare instead of showing up and winging it and hoping that no one notices. And this really is an opportunity to set yourself apart because, again, most people are stuck in the busyness and they show up underprepared to most things. Now, the final area of preparation is for leap activities. Leap activities are one-off events or situations that have the ability to catapult you forward. So these can really result in big step jumps and big opportunities for you. So this might be a speech or a keynote or an important presentation or a job interview. And for these type of events, we usually do these less frequently, but they do have a bigger reward. If we can pull them off, if we can leave a great impression with people, then they can propel you forward. And for these types of activities, I think that ratio of preparation completely flips. So instead of it being 1-4 preparation time for a regular meeting, here you are talking about 4-1. That means 4 hours preparation for a 1 hour interview. To be honest, I think that is an absolute baseline. I think in reality, if you want to stand out and really maximize the opportunity and set yourself up for the best possible outcomes, then I think the ratio is actually more like 10x or 20x. And I know this from my own experience. I've always done a lot of presenting in my work. That's never been a problem for me. But doing keynotes and running workshops is something I've only really started to do in the last, 2 or 3 years. And I will tell you, when I'm preparing to run a workshop, I am spending days and days preparing for something that may only be 90 minutes or 2 hours. But it is completely worth it. And I know the difference of how I show up, having done that deep preparation, having really thought through what I'm there to do, how I craft my message, and how I show up. And I appreciate that spending 10 hours for a 1 hour meeting sounds like a crazy number, but I want you to think about the potential benefits, the win. If you go to the interview and you give it everything you've got and you nail it, what is the benefit, right? If you're talking about a job, that is a whole new opportunity for you. That is a pay rise for you. That is likely tens of thousands of dollars in your bank account for 10 hours of preparation. And it might seem like in the moment that the trade-off is unrealistic or too much, but you need to think about the results of making this a win. And you need to go in with the mindset of maximizing every single opportunity, whether it is the day-to-day stuff, whether it is the big leap activities. You want to show how you consistently produce at a level of excellence that stands out from everyone else, because that is what will get you ahead. And coming back to this idea of self-doubt and imposter syndrome, it will always be there to a varying degree. And what we want to do is just make sure that whilst that self-doubt may be there, that you have done everything you possibly can have done to set yourself up for success. And preparation is the key to the big stuff and to the small stuff. Okay, my friend, thank you for being here. I hope you have benefited from today's episode. And if you have, I would love it if you could leave a review because it really helps other people find the podcast as well. And I'll see you for the next episode of Building Up Women in Property. Thank you for joining me on the Building Up Women in Property podcast. I'm Rebecca Bangura, and if you'd like to learn more about what I do, head over to LinkedIn and connect with me. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.